We are headed into the fall market of 2022. We know that showings are down and buyer demand has softened a little bit. So if you are a seller in today's market, what you are asking yourself right now is, will my home still sell in this market? And if so, what's the pricing going to look like? Stick around, we're going to get into that today. Hello Central Maine, welcome back to the channel. It is your realtor Nick Isgro with eXp Realty, and as I just stated at the beginning, today we're going to just have a brief discussion on what the fall market looks like right now. We know that buyer demand has softened a little bit, but you want to know, is your home still going to sell? The answers are all up ahead, so stick around to the end. Now, before I get into that, I do want to welcome you here to the channel. If you've never been here before, we cover all things real estate here in the state of Maine, but particularly in the Central Maine market. If that's of interest to you and adds value to your process in the buying and selling of homes, do me a favor, go ahead and hit the like button on this video. Hit subscribe, knock that little alarm bell. You'll be notified every time we put out new content. Now, there's a lot of bluster on TV, there's a lot of bluster on the radio. Everywhere you look, you're hearing different opinions on what's going on in the housing market. Not so much for right here in Central Maine, but in general. But as we've seen over the last year, outside of a few really overheated areas, most of the trends that we've seen here in Central Maine have really translated out to those national trends. So the two really are very similar. But what's going on here in Central Maine and what's going on a national level? Well, we have seen a decrease in buyer activity. As much as we've seen inventories rising, we've seen actually less showings, which is actually the cause of that inventory rising. It's not so much that there's so many more new listings coming to the market, it's that the listings that are coming to the market are taking a little bit longer to sell. There's fewer going into contract every month than there were, let's say, a year ago. So that stagnation time in the market, which by the way, is really just a few weeks on the market, still here in Kennebec County anyway. It was about 17 days as we closed out the last month, is causing a little bit of an increase or a spike in inventory. Inventory levels, by the way, here, just over 1 month of inventory. So even that, not really a number that's getting out of control. But nonetheless, as we covered in a recent video, nationally, what we're seeing through the Showing Time app that tracks all of the showing activity that goes on in the residential real estate market, year over year, from this year to last year, there has been a 26% decrease in the active showings in the Showing Time app. Now, what does that really mean if we're saying that the showings have decreased and that the buyer demand has gone down? Well, we have to look at this through the historical lens, because remember, the last couple of years have been completely abnormal to any sense of a normal real estate market. The pandemic years, 2020, 2021s, were just nuts as far as the activity in the market, which is why, in fact, the Fed started raising the rates. At least part of the reason was to dampen or soften some of that activity so that they could try to control inflation. Not doing a very good job, by the way, but I digress nonetheless. We are in that market now where there has been a softening of the buyer activity. But what does it mean? Well, let's take a look over the last couple of years and let's go back before the pandemic, because that's really going to make a lot of sense when we look at all of this. All right, taking a look at this graph right here, as you can see, over the last 6 years, what's happening? Yes, this year has buyer demand softened? Has it scaled back a little bit? For sure, as we're looking at showings as the indicator of that. But as we look over the last 6 years, we're actually still above where we were in the market prior to the pandemic. So right now, buyer activity is actually higher than it was before we entered the last 2 years. So what we're not seeing is a major drop off of buyer activity. We're seeing a slight moderating of that activity, and that's great news if you're a seller. So remember, as we just said, we still have just barely over a month of inventory on the market. We have average sales prices that are, at least here in Kennebec County, almost 6% above where they were a year ago, and buyer activity that, as we can see, yes, it's moderated, it's higher than it was prior to entering the last 2 years. The last 2 years, clearly an unsustainable type of market. Looks like we're maybe going back to pre-pandemic activity, but for now, we're still actually well above and beyond the activity that we were back in 2019, 2018 in that particular market. So what does that mean if you're a seller though? It does mean that as inventories increase, as buyers are going out there, they are starting to take a little bit more time before making a decision on what house to buy, because they have more houses to look at. This is where it becomes really important that when you're working with a real estate professional that you and the realtor that you are working with have an actual marketing strategy for your home. And when I say marketing strategy, it is just that. The marketing strategy includes pricing. Not only do you want to make sure you're getting the maximum market value for your home, but you want to make sure that price-wise, strategically wise, you're positioned in the market to attract the buyers to your home. How else are you going to do that besides just the price? Well, you're going to do that by using things like professional photos, making sure that your home is showcased, staged in those photos above and beyond some of the competition. You're going to make sure that your yard and your outside of your home has the maximum amount of curb appeal, and you want to make sure that it's being marketed actively. That means that there's some kind of active marketing plan, whether that's in print media, whether that's most likely going to be on different social media platforms, different video tours, every possible way that your home can get in front of as many eyes as possible in the best light as possible. Ultimately, more competition means if you want to maximize the price point on your home, you have to maximize the value, and that includes all those things we just talked about. So make sure as you're headed into the market, you have an appropriate strategy that's right for you, your family, your situation, your specific property, and you're going to make out okay. Yes, your home is definitely still going to sell. It's still going to sell at an advantageous price, actually probably at a price that is higher than it would have been sold for a year ago. That's great news for you and for all of the other sellers that are in the market right now. Now, if you are in the market right now, if you've been thinking about getting into the market, or if you just have some thoughts and opinion from viewing what's going on in the market, please go ahead and drop a comment below. Of course, again, my name is Nick Isgro. I'm with eXp Realty right here in Central Maine. If you are looking for a real estate professional to work with, to guide you in this process, to come up with a strategy that is appropriate for you, all of my contact information is in the post below. Please feel free to reach out in any way that's most convenient for you. I promise to get right back to you. As always, thanks so much for sticking around to the end of this video. Until the next one, I'll see you next time.